You're tuned into Masters of the Genre, where I, Cardinal Sin, take you right to the source of the most important genre creators of their generation. Authors, actors, directors, science fiction, fantasy, comics, film, and other creators that shape our genre fiction and entertainment. Get ready to leave the world of the everyday behind and go head to head with the masters of the genre. Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and today we have a very special Masters of the Genre for you. So without too much ceremony, let me introduce Chris Gore and Jason Brock, my partners in crime, for today's discussion. Great to have you both on Masters of the Genre.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good to be here.
Cool.
We are going to have some fun today, and just as kind of, what do they call it? Whatever it's called. I've got some kind of browser computer camera issue going on that I can't figure out. I'm not coming to fix it until Friday, so you're both going to be kind of big the whole time, and I'm just going to be minding the store along with the mods while we chat about Logan's Run, the novel, the film, the comics, and of course memorializing our friend Bill. Mm-hmm. And while folks are rolling in, I should say this is going to be a totally spoiler discussion. You've had 55 years to read the book and 51 years to see the movie, so
well,
your spoiler warning has been given.
It's the internet, man. Everybody gets pissed about these things. All right, can we swear? Because I swear.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah, you can swear all you want.
Excellent. Swearing's good.
So let's say hello to some folks that are here. And like I said, we're waiting for some folks to roll in. I'm here. I know that. Mm-hmm. Pat S. is here. Hello. Peter Graves is here. Phantom Boomer is here. Hello.
Phantom Boomer.
Darius Munchausen is here. Gap After Dark is here. Did I say Pat S. was here already?
Yes.
Yeah. Rui is in the house. Hello, Rui. And we have...
I don't know if you're a Fulci fan, but I'm wearing my, zombie shirt.
Oh, Fulci's awesome. I'm pretty sure Chris is a Fulci fan anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I just sent you a bio too, Gil.
Yeah, we decided to dispense with the bios.
Yeah, so if you don't need it, you don't need it. But if you need it...
So, Cosmic Squirrel is here. Greetings. Son of a Red Shirt is here. Yes, should be an interesting show. Skogli Yotun is here. Ari is here. Looks like everybody is in the house. James Caserta is here. He says, I'm here. All right. So
sorry, it's messing with my hair. It's very hot here. I don't know where you are, Chris, but it's like 100 degrees here today. So
I hope you have air conditioning.
It's in the 90s. It's Pasadena, but it's fine. It's fine.
It's 68 degrees here in Kansas, but it just rained, so it's humid as hell.
We were just in LA, actually, so it's always fun to go down there. I know it's not Pasadena, but close enough.
Cool.
So this is our Logan's Run / William F. Nolan Memorial, and I just wanted to start out by mentioning that this started out as a chat that Chris and I were having during one of his shows, and we both thought it would be fun to talk about the differences between the book and the film. So thanks again, both of you, for coming on the show today. I wanted to mention in 2015, Rolling Stone named Logan's Run the 27th among the 50th best science fiction movies of the 70s. And I noticed how many science fiction films have been influenced by both the book and the film. The Island comes to mind, for example.
You mean things that are like completely kind of Logan ripoffs, or like just science fiction in general?
Both. Kind of.
Because there's quite a few of both, actually.
It's funny that the movie is, has been so influential, but it's so dated now. If you talk to anybody now, I mean, it's one of my personal favorite science fiction, movies and franchises, but it literally has no impact today, even though I think it could, because the novel, while in the we can talk about this later in more depth, but the movie, you could die at 30, right? Which is kind of like, to me, especially looking at it now, it's like, oh wow, that's when most women's careers in Hollywood are over, is when they turn 30.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. I don't think is true today, but I kind of felt like, is that kind of a comment on that? But, in the movie, you die, you go on carousel to renew at the age of 30. Of course, we find out later they're actually just being killed to make room for more. In the novel, you die at 21.
Yeah.
And you're well aware that you're going to die. You're basically saying, like, the novel is very much, and it was weird because I saw Logan's Run when I was probably too young to see it. I mean, the movie was rated PG, but
Was it really?
it was rated PG. Go back and look. Logan's Run is rated PG.
It's got nudity in it, man.
With all
It's got
that
a
Jenny
lot of
Agutter
nudity. It's got Jenny Agutters' bare butt and breasts. It has
There was more than that too. There was more that got cut out, but
right. And then they go to the love shop, which is basically a place where tons of people are having an orgy.
Yep.
And they dialed back. Clearly they shot it. There's a lot of naked people, but they dialed it, made it darker, so you could barely kind of glimpse pieces of bodies. But it's a it's a movie that has a lot of sex. I mean, that even that outfit that Jenny Agutter wears, that's like, on the side, she's just not, you can tell she's not wearing anything, and she's just sort of naked from the side. It's super hot.
It's totally hot, man.
I strongly recommend using Google Images, look up Jenny Agutter Logan's Run, and there are like candids that she did like by a pool, and they obviously they had a set photographer that took a lot of pictures, but the movie's very sexy. And I think the reason that the movie still holds up is the relationship between Logan and Jessica. It's a romance, and it's a very, very powerful romance.
Yeah.
And
the book is very sexual.
Yes, that's true.
The book's even more sexual.
But the differences in the book are like, it's just very weird. I remember seeing it as a kid. I was in 3rd grade. My mom dropped me off and picked me up after the movie. It's a typical thing that you did back then. Back when there was helicopter parenting wasn't even, even a term that anyone used. I saw the movie and I loved it. I mean, I loved it. All the science fiction themes, the ideas behind it, relationship. I don't think this movie would actually do very well today, because very, very, I don't know that it would do well if they stuck to kind of the heart of an amalgam of the movie and the novel. My understanding is when Bryan Singer was going to do it, he was going to age down the characters, which read into that what you will. But no, I loved it. And then I went and I bought the novel, and then I remember reading the novel as a kid and thinking, this has like nothing to do with the movie. I mean, it's some of the basic ideas, but there's no domed city. It's the entire world. The novel supposes
there's no carousel.
There's no carousel. There's no domed city. But what the novel does, it takes the idea of the youth movement of the late 60s and said, well, what if that just went completely crazy? The youth movement took over, that whole idea of don't trust anyone over 30, right? Yep. They take that concept to an extreme where you voluntarily euthanize yourself and die as a way to preserve a all young society.
Now we call that the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's the internet. Yeah. So I don't know, although it's interesting because when you look at Logan's Run, what I find fascinating about it is, in a way, it predicted like dating apps like Tinder and whatnot and chat roulette, because Logan's sitting there and he's dialing, the circuit, right? What's the circuit? dialing. You put yourself on the circuit if you want to go have random, sex with whoever, right?
Mhm.
You want to have you just want to have sex. There are no deep relationships in the future. It's
Or
all
sex
just,
and drugs.
yeah, exactly. Sex, drugs, and it's just random hookups and that's it. And Logan's dialing the circuit, and a guy comes and looks at him, and he's like, not
Yeah.
into dudes, and he
Yeah.
sends him away. And then Jessica comes, and then he's like, oh, do you prefer women? Like, so sex is very free, right? Free
Yeah.
love, all that.
H.G.
But-
Wells, man.
What's that?
H.G. Wells.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so then they begin to form a bond, and that's kind of not, it's something that's not forbidden necessarily, but it feels like it's not like societally supported. And then you get to the concept of meeting Peter Ustinov as the old man, right? Who had a mother and a father, and they learn the concept of mother-father parenting, loving
The
relationship.
family unit.
Yeah, and it's kind of foreign to them. It's really interesting. So I wonder, thematically speaking, especially as the nuclear family continues to erode, and the idea that like marriage is not something that's even like promoted. Marriage and having a family is not even something that's promoted, not so much even by our government, which is very weird. It's just very weird. We're at this place where we are. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there's a lot you could do theme wise with a remake of Logan's Run. And it's interesting. Obviously I got the novel and read it and was just confused because there's really no connection. And I, at the time, used to buy a ton of movie novelizations because the movie novelization was a way to, that is the paperback that I have.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the one everybody had mostly.
The one everybody had. I never saw the versions before, although I love the various artwork that you'll see popping up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had that, and it was like weird because I loved movie novelizations. I read movie novelizations for a lot of science fiction, Star Wars, among others. And to me, it was sort of like before DVDs existed, before a concept like deleted scenes existed, most movie novelizations were written in a couple weeks, and they were they included scenes that were in the shooting script, but not necessarily in the final cut movie that's released theatrically, right?
Right.
So it was a way to get, like, at least for films like Alien, among others, like, oh wow, Captain Dallas lived. Like, there's a scene where Captain Dallas survived, and some of that.
They even filmed that scene, but they cut
filmed it. You can see it. I mean, it's in the deleted scenes and whatnot. But like at the time, it was novelizations, or if you remember these, there were, of course, Marvel would do comic book adaptations. I bought the comic books of Logan's Run. I still have them. The comic books of Dune, among others. And then they would even go so far. Do you remember those photo novels?
Yep.
And they had those as well, which was basically just the entire movie. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Layer of laser death.
No. Fantastic.
What a great scene.
Bill Nolan, I'm enjoying this riff you're going on, but I was going to say Bill Nolan has the original George Perez cover for number 1.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
He has the original art.
And he did something horrible to it. He had it at his house, and it's black and white, paste up work. And it's really big, and I have it somewhere in the other room. But he, oh my God, dude, he used a magic marker to color it.
No, he ruined George Perez's art. No
I
disrespect.
said, Bill, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that?
But
He said,
it's,
oh, it looks better. I'm like, oh.
but this is a movie that I'm so glad, Gil, when you invited me on, this is a movie that's stuck with me from being not just sort of the member berries of being a kid, but it's a movie that I remember watching the Oscars because they showed scenes from movies. I would watch Siskel and Ebert. I don't know if Siskel and Ebert was around when Logan's Run was around, but I would watch movie review shows or any talk show that had anyone from a movie. And I remember seeing a blooper, which was a prank that they pulled during the filming of Logan's Runs. It was a scene where Jessica's picking berries and Logan somehow takes whipped cream and sort of shoves it in her face. And I remember
Weird.
I remember this from the 70s. It was bizarre. but like it was interesting. It was just like this is when marketing genre movies was not particularly sophisticated. But I'm really curious because there's a documentary that's in the midst of being made right now. I believe the working title is called The Novelization Itself, and it's being produced by Steven Scarlatta, who did the movie Jodorowsky's Dune.
Mm-hmm.
So he spent years working on this doc, and he interviewed everyone from like Alan Dean Foster to among all of the great, like the names you see that come up as people that do movie novelizations. In addition, he interviewed me, and I talked about Logan's Run and Flash Gordon, how there's like extra scenes in the Flash Gordon novelization, which is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
That the Flash Gordon novelization goes down some bizarre pathways. You find out that Dale Arden was on this getaway to try to forget her boyfriend who got her into the swingers life. This is in the novel. It's freaking weird.
Wow.
So her previous boyfriend was like a swinger and kind of got her involved. She didn't want anything to do with that. She was at this hotel to kind of like decompress and sort of met Flash Gordon in the lobby.
So they made like a complete backstory is what you're saying.
They made a complete backstory, completely unnecessary. And I'm like, I wonder if anyone even read the novelization before it went to press. Because there's all this perverse. I mean, you've seen Flash Gordon with Sam Jones. There's a lot of sexual innuendo. I mean, it's
Queen's best album, man.
Yeah, I love Queen's
totally.
I love it. It's great.
Mostly
Brian May, I understand.
Yeah, it's great.
A great album.
But there's a lot of stuff that like is expanded upon that I'm like, oh wow, it was an innuendo in the movie, and here it's just a sex scene, but told with a lot of flowery language.
I think the 40th anniversary 4K disc of Flash Gordon has the CD of the soundtrack with it.
Oh, does it really? I have to get it.
If I'm not mistaken.
I missed it. I missed the window when it was on sale and kind of blew it. But Logan's Run, I don't know why it's a movie that stuck with me. It is a difficult sell to fans of current genre stuff, mainly because the special effects are so unsophisticated. I mean, it's like that was a time where effects were like there were some effects that were really good, some wide shots of the city that look great, that are well photographed. Then there's some terrible ones where it looks like a train set.
Yeah, it's an obvious miniature.
What about
Box? Obvious miniature? Yeah, or no, I thought Box was pretty
good. From the sea.
Yeah,
Boxers get protein from the sea.
From the sea. And that kind of overbite. It was weird, but what a cool like concept box.
And they filmed that whole scene where he sculpted them too, but they cut it because they wanted to get a PG. That's why.
Oh my god!
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then carry on, Chris. There's a lot I want to respond to, but I
okay, cool. But I'm just sort of entryway saying I'm a huge fan of Logan's Run as a movie. Got me into the comic, the novel. And there has been talk about making Logan's Run into rebooting it for years. And I think it's one of the movies that could benefit from that. But the thing that worked, looking back at Logan Run, the thing that worked the best was the chemistry between Michael York and Jenny Agutter. And
absolutely,
what's fascinating when you watch that movie, what's interesting is the score, right? At the beginning of the film.
I love
Jerry
the score.
Goldsmith, right?
Yeah, Jerry Goldsmith. But the score at the beginning, while you're in the Dome City, is all computer, Moog. It's like keyboard, like very futuristic sounding, or at least futuristic from that era. And then once they leave the city, it's a symphony. It's
like a lot of analog synth.
Yeah, analog synth but once they leave the city, it's orchestral score.
Right.
So they completely change it. So I don't know why this film has stuck with me. I mean, I also remember seeing the television show, reading the comic book that went beyond the events of the film. Like those tend to not last because they're not very good. But the television show, I'm trying to think, was it more than one season?
One season.
Yeah, one season. And I remember the pilot, and they have this sort of humanoid robot that they're friends with.
Rem.
Yeah, Rem. He was okay. Like, I just remember it was so, like, they basically just remade the first movie with two different actors. And I just remember thinking, well, this is not very good, But but yeah, it's a thing that's not gone away. They failed to, like, God, I have a laser disc of Logan's Run, where on the back of it, it's an essay by William F. Nolan. And he talks about how that a new Logan's Run is coming.
Right.
And he said that for years. And, Bryan Singer had a shot
It
at
was true for years too.
It was true for years.
Yeah, it was in development hell for years.
I don't know that Bryan Singer will probably ever make a big Hollywood movie again. He may make a comeback in an indie sense, but he developed it for a long time. And he was going to age down the people, the characters, right? Make it more faithful to the novel, which would have been interesting, but I don't know a lot. And then I also there's an episode, and I'm going to stop because I know I'm rambling. Just sort of want to get us in. I did an episode of a podcast that I did years ago. I'll find the link to it. It was a podcast where we talked about Logan's Run. I had a couple of friends on who are also fans of it. And Michael York, was at a retrospective screening at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood.
Oh, cool.
Darklight, and did a Q&A, and I recorded the Q&A and I made it part of the podcast.
Wow.
So I'll find it and I'll put it in the private chat, because there are things he talked about. He talked about like the development of the script. Michael York he's very passionate about this movie. And he kind of disappeared and did like bit roles here and there, but like
until Austin Powers.
Yeah, Austin Powers, and that's fine. Good. He's working. I mean, I think
Basil Exposition.
I think didn't Cabaret come out in '76 also? So he was busy around that time.
He was busy. But like that movie, they made it really special. And there are things about the movie that like even to today are a little confusing for me. Like, what were Logan's motivations? Like, when does he change? Because it seems like he's kind of still with the Sandmen up until a certain point. He was going to expose, what the kids, what do they call the kids again?
The Cubs.
Cubs. Yeah. The Cubs. Like, he was going to expose them, and there was that girl. And then he kind of gives her that little pellet to kind of save her. And Francis, witnesses that. And then there's stuff at the end in in the chamber with, the American flag all tattered. And I mean, just some great stuff. I mean, that was an era when sci-fi really swung for the fences and took chances. And
the whole Lincoln Memorial scene is in.
Yes. God, that scene. And Tim Burton tried to kind of
remember it got an Academy Award for special effects back then.
Well, it was weird.
I believe it got the first Academy Award for special effects.
Yeah, one of them, it's a special award, but it was pre-categorization of special effects but even that's changed so much because of CGI. But I wish you to finish your thought, Chris, because it's a remarkable film that I don't know. Can you capture lightning in a bottle? I don't know in terms of remake, but I'm interested. Here we are, so many years later, having this conversation about this milestone in genre filmmaking. And this predates. This was the year that Jaws came out and Logan's Run, and then the following year was Star Wars. And that, of course, changed everything. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But this movie does not really get its due. And it's unfortunate because the special effects are everything from just spectacular matte paintings, right? And just amazing stuff with stuff that's like kind of the miniatures don't hold up. And it's the same with the original. People forget Superman the motion picture, right? There are there's a vast divide between the great special effects and then some of the cheesy special effects that didn't hold up. I mean, now there's really no excuse for effects to be bad. I think it's just, now the movies are just bad.
Now the movies are just bad.
That's right.
Yes.
I'd rather have bad special effects with a good movie, I think.
Yeah. But
that brings to mind, I wanted to mention the book and the movie couldn't be more different. I read the book last night for the first time in many years and then watched the film. And there's so much travel in the book, I guess they couldn't fit it in the film, although the ending of the book is so good, it really seems like they should have tried to work it in, although that might have been too different between a 2001 A Space Odyssey book in 1967 to a 1976 movie when people seem to have lost interest in the American manned space program altogether. And I guess they probably needed a feel-good ending for the movie. For my part, you guys will dig this, something really strange. I remember reading the book when I was 11, and I was too young to see films of that type. And Chris, like you, I was a voracious reader, so they ended up on my bookshelf. Logan's Run, The Omen, Alien, and I thought all my life I thought I'd remembered a scene in which two quote women unquote were gossiping, and one was telling the other about the great sex that she had with an 11-year-old. So I
What?
thought it was this really
Wow.
lascivious
Wow.
book that I shouldn't have been reading at that age. When
Wow.
not only was that scene not in the book, but apart from what would have been considered more or less a story about high school aged kids in a pleasure dome, it was perfectly fine. I mean, there are these high concept science fiction elements in it, but I cut my teeth on that stuff. I mean, I must have self inserted that scene myself at age 11. I guess I was the lascivious one.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the movie was very progressive, and we may have even gone beyond what was, what was in the book.
Oh, you mean today?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I can't find this episode. I'll find it at some point. But
Apologies, I have pet reptiles, and one of my tortoises was in a jam.
Oh, well, that's good that you got him out of the jam.
I did.
I wanted to ask you guys what some of your thoughts about the differences between the book and the film are, and if it influenced you guys as a youngster the way it did me, and let's face it, hundreds of thousands of other young boys it helped through puberty, I'm sure.
Well, I'd like to address a couple of the points Chris brought up,
yeah,
Sure.
please.
and then we'll go into that for sure. Talk about the novelization. There's a couple of weird things about it. For one thing, I was good friends with Dan O'Bannon, and then and he talked to me one time when we were at his house about how the Alien novelization came about, and he was just funny. This is funny what he said. He says, "Yeah, that guy," he meant Alan Dean Foster. He just took the script and went into another room and typed like a bastard, and then it was done. And I'm like, wow, okay, so that explains why there's all these scenes in there that aren't in the movie. And he says, yes. So that was kind of weird. The other thing was that William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson, okay, they wrote the book together, obviously, but it was Bill's original idea. And so it was kind of always his baby. And George wound up not doing anything with it, although he did do an unpublished and unused treatment called Jessica's Run. So whether something ever happens with that or not, I can't speak to. But there is that. And it was done kind of at the time. Okay, so it's older. And whereas Bill did, Logan's World, Logan's Search, the novella Logan's Return, and like a couple of short stories, and like he and I collaborated on the Blue Water comic, and then he worked with Malibu somewhat on their version of the comic. And what's interesting about all those iterations is that I think there's like 4 versions of a comic book. One's the Marvel, one's the Malibu, one's the Blue Water. I can't remember the other one. And there's a British adaptation that was all illustrated for children, and so where they taught it in school. But yeah, that's Last Day. So yeah, I wrote that one completely myself. Although they credited
really?
Bill, I wrote that one, but he loved it. So anyway, that's because Bill and I were also working on a Logan book, and I shelved it when he came to live with us for a while toward the end of his life. And so, but he and I had worked on, an outline of it together. So I'm going to finish that up. But about Alan Dean Foster, he and Bill wrote 3 treatments for 3 novels, and I have them. So I've been in touch with Alan Dean Foster about these, and I would like to maybe try to see if I could help Alan Dean Foster finish them, because it's a trilogy of books, and there's like 30 pages each done. And they're from the 80s, so there'd be some updating that would have to happen. But I think that'd be a really interesting group of things to put out there, because I think there's a hunger for a lot of Logan stuff. And as far as the film, though, the film itself, before we get into the differences, Bill Nolan was very much an advocate of the film when he first saw it. and he was on set a couple of times and stuff like that. And George Clayton Johnson never went to the set. And George, when he saw it, he says something to the effect of, "That was a waste of my time sitting on my dead ass," or something like that. And so he was not really a big fan of the movie. But you know, George, who we also got to be friends with, he was a great guy. He just kind of let Bill run with it and did whatever he wanted to do with it. And so Bill's vision of Logan, he wanted to see a new film, and George did too, but Bill really did. And it was very enthusiastic, and it went through many iterations. It had like 8 or 9 writers, and
Didn't Bill write a new screenplay for it?
Do what?
Didn't Bill write a new screenplay for it?
Well, Bill and George wrote 2 versions of a screenplay based on the novel before they even had the actual screenplay they used. But they're considered property of whoever it was at the time. I think it was Turner. But it would be Warner Brothers property now, so you can't see it or read it. I have a copy of it, but you know, and it might have leaked out there online, but it's very close to the book. He was very close to the book, and I think it actually would have been a better script, but they got David Zolla Goodman, excuse me, and he wound up doing it. He was a hot writer, you know, he'd done Straw Dogs and things like that, and so I know that Bill talked to David Zolla Goodman one time and said, "What do you think about science fiction?" He said that David Zolla Goodman said, "I see science fiction as a series of black boxes." And then he kind of walked off. And Bill didn't know what to make of that, you know, so he's like, "Black boxes, what is he talking about?" And so, you know, he's like, well, I think he means it's, you know, indecipherable or hard to understand, for him at least. But he wound up turning in a decent script. I think that there are issues with it. I'm actually planning an essay about, there's one thing about the script, I don't know if you watch it and with this in mind, there's a lot of homosexual subtext in the movie that's not in the book, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. There's a lot of innuendo and references between, you know, the main characters Logan and his compatriot there that he's a Sandman with. There's also the scene that you mentioned, Chris, where the dial-up, you know, kind of situation with the guy showing up.
Yeah.
There's also other things in the book, and I mean in the movie, that kind of hew to that sort of aesthetic. And I'm not sure if it was just the time, you know, the 70s, kind of the liberational aspect of it, or how it was edgy or something like that, or if it was really something intentional. You know, I mean, Michael York has spoken about his bisexuality and this kind of thing too. And so it's weird that there's all these little things I could pinpoint. I made like a running list when I was watching the movie one time, but it's a fascinating thing to juxtapose against a novel, which doesn't have any of that subtext. So, you know, I'm planning an article about that actually. So there's a lot of weird stuff about the movie. And I think, yeah, some of the effects are great. Some of them look terrible now, but it doesn't spoil, at least for me, the enjoyment of the characterization and the acting in the film. And the direction is okay. It's serviceable. It's a little flat, but you know, I much rather prefer directional aspects that they had then versus the directional aspects they have now. The reason I say that is because now we're having like a convergence of the video game aesthetic and the cinematic aesthetic.
Right.
And I preferably, I'm more of a cineast, so I don't want to merge those things necessarily. I mean, I understand there's uses for CGI.
They shouldn't be making films with the Unreal Engine, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's uses for CGI certainly that can be very effective and useful and better than what we used to have. But then it gets way overdone, and you see all these impossible moving shots and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, that really takes away from my enjoyment of the cinematic element of the film, which is
it can take you out of the movie.
Dream, you know what I mean? It's too active. Let's put it that way. For me.
For sure. Hyperactive almost.
Yeah. So there's that. Now, we want to talk about contrasting the book and the movie. Well, the ending is very different. Carousel is totally different. The reason they have Carousel, do you understand why they put that in there?
No.
To sell the whole thing better.
No, there's a reason they put Carousel in. The reason they put Carousel in is because MGM owned 2 properties. One was Make Room by Harry Harrison, which became Soylent Green. Okay.
Right.
So they needed something in Soylent Green. This is what Bill was explaining to me, to be kind of a a linchpin scene, you know, for like Edward G. Robinson, and they used the sleep shop from Logan's Run because they owned both properties. So they just took that and said, we'll use that for this Edward G. Robinson situation. Then they didn't have anything for Logan's Run. And so they, excuse me, they dreamed up Carousel. And so Carousel, I think, is very effective visually, you know, and all the costuming and stuff like that is cool. But do they ever reach renewal? Well, Bill and I have debated this. I told Bill, I said, well, what if I was a devil's advocate and said, well, actually, when they explode, that is renewal. Maybe they never, maybe it's not that they don't reach it. Maybe that is renewal and we don't know what happens after that. Kind of like what happens after death.
Reincarnation.
There's one way of looking at it. Because he was always like, they never renew. And I'm like, well, maybe they renewed. We just don't know. Or maybe they're reincarnated, or who knows how that works, because they don't explain that apparatus very well.
Right.
It's just a visual, and then you can make what you want of it. So what I've said to people is, I don't know. I can't debate whether they renew or not, but I tend to think that maybe that's what they intended, and they just didn't, you know, set it up to where it could be read as easily as it should have been, you know, or it could be just a big trick by the government. Haha, you know, all that kind of stuff that everybody likes to do. So it's hard to say. It could go either way. And so Bill, he thought that was maybe kind of interesting, you know, but I would still like to see what they would do. I don't know that they would use Carousel in a new movie.
Oh gosh, I would hope not. Well,
to that end, you know, the movie is still technically in development at Warner Brothers, but there.
Does that mean that J.J. Abrams is going to get his hands on it?
Oh, let's hope not.
Well,
let's hope not.
I can't say because I'm not at liberty legally to explain it to you, but there is something happening with it. Now, it's not a movie that's getting made, but something is happening. And I'm not saying it's a streamer either. I'm just saying there's some legal maneuverings going on that may change what happens.
Well, let's see. It was an MGM movie.
In the next 2 years.
MGM is owned by Warner Brothers. Everything at Warner Brothers
is
now going to be
didn't
handled
Amazon
by
buy
J.J.
MGM?
Abrams.
I think Amazon bought MGM, but I could be mistaken on it. Amazon bought something. You know, Amazon Studios is now own like a big old studio. I can't remember which one.
Oh, okay. Well,
I think it's MGM, but you know, that has very little to do with it. But I am curious to see what's going to happen in the next 2 years. Nothing's going to happen this year, and nothing's going to happen next year. But late next year, there is going to be something happening.
But I wonder if their thought is that this is a franchise, at least to us, right? Like it's
got potential to be a franchise.
It has potential to be a franchise, and we're all big fans of it. But I wonder if they look at the kids today, and they see, you know, because there's so many interesting elements from Logan's Run, you know, and you can see those influences in other movies that took the concept differently. You know, even things, just a lot of different things, right? I mean, is that sort of dystopian future, and how do we control population? Well, you just choose to die at 30, you go on this thing called Carousel, right? They got to keep the population at exactly the same level. But there's so many interesting concepts in it. I could see Hollywood doing this and ruining it based on trying to insert, like, because what was always great about older science fiction is that it looked at things that could happen in the future and the detrimental effects of those things. The detrimental effects of aggressive population control is you're murdering the futures of people, right? It's not explicitly said in Logan's Run that relationships between men and women, like a committed relationship, is disallowed, but it's certainly not encouraged in the culture. And we see that, like, what they're doing is kind of radical. Like, they're choosing each other, right? They're choosing to be beloved husband, beloved wife. That's right. It's so funny that's, you know, we're not being encouraged in today's culture even to marry and have a family. Those things are looked down upon, unfortunately. Yeah. The value of being a stay-at-home mom and or a stay-at-home father is not something that is revered or given value. I think it has value,
Yeah.
but that's not, I think, what the mainstream narrative or mainstream press is really pushing. And
No, I think it's definitely different from our parents' generation for sure.
for sure. But also when you look at even like Logan returning to the domed city, right? Tattered clothes. They've both been through a lot, right? They've got the old man who can't make it, because they got to swim through this circuitous route to even get back to the city. And he's spouting everything you know about the world and the culture is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be really interesting to explore, because over the last couple of years, I would say that a lot of people have kind of woken up to the fact that, well, maybe not everything we're being told by our overlords or by by the mainstream media and or our government, maybe not everything is virtuous. Maybe not everything is in our best interest. Maybe we're being fed things is almost like fairy tales, like you tell a kid. You don't want to tell a kid, the full truth about, you give a sanitized version of history, so they can sort of get the basics. And then you introduce, more and more complex the way history really was, which is freaking brutal. A lot of people died and people were assholes to each other. That's the history. It's brutal and horrifying. And we're here now, and let's hope that we reduce those kinds of things. But the idea of like Logan coming back and saying everything in society is a lie. This is a lie. The life clocks are a lie. There's a world outside. Like, wait, what? It would be like coming in and saying to us the world is flat. Like it's not round or whatever. Just it would change our perception of reality, and that aspect alone is such a huge concept. And it was
it takes them twice, to get them to stop turning around and going back to carousel in the film. He shouts it out and they all kind of laugh him off and turn back around, and then she says, no, he's telling the truth. And then they kind of turn around again and laugh her off. And then it takes a third time, for, the eventual ending that we see.
One thing I know about the book that is a truism is, and it reminds me of something else, and I'll explain. It is not a vehicle, let's say, for political consideration. All right, it's not rooted in any kind of realpolitik or any kind of political philosophy. Okay, now it can, like any kind of interesting piece of art, it can be read that way. There are lots of libertarians who think Logan's Run is a libertarian track, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
I can assure you that Bill and George have told me over and over, no, it's not. It has no socio-political overtones other than we need older people in our society to show younger people, the ways that we keep the society going. Otherwise,
to balance out the experience
of the society, of the society breaking down. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a true through thought there that is real. Okay. And that is reality. Now, as a Gen Xer, and I'm not sure, I don't know if you are, Chris, but I know
I'm Gen X. Gen X for sure.
We're all Gen X here.
So as a Gen Xer, I can see where we kind of do straddle this divide of the purely analog and the purely digital, or the digital natives versus, the world before, because we kind of were there as it was happening. And so we become fluent in both, or are fluent in both. And so I see a little bit of that Loganism happening, where younger people don't know things. And we didn't know things about the 20s and 30s necessarily, but we knew enough because the technology didn't change very radically. It was iterative. Now it's not just iterative, but it's totally different than it was when we were growing up. In some cases, like your phone and, the social expectations of parenting and this kind of thing. Sure. Some things are better, not saying bad things about people or being ableist or something like that. But other things are less good, which, for lack of a better term, the wokeism stuff, that sort of thing. I know Bill was very against that in the new movie. He didn't want this real political thrust, in other words, based on, for example, they were talking about just flipping Logan's gender. He was very against that. And I'm with him too, because that story is not Logan. Okay, that's someone else. Okay, and if you're a creator, that matters to you because that's the story you chose to tell was Logan.
Of course, yeah.
You know, you didn't tell, oh, we'll just make him a girl. Well, that's
Neil
not
Gaiman.
going to work. That's not the same
Neil
story.
Gaiman.
I mean, you can have a story like that, but it's not Logan's Run. Okay, it's some other story, and that's fine. But you can't just say, we're just going to do that. It's a very disrespectful thing to do to the creation itself, I think.
I
And
agree.
so injecting that kind of politics, which unfortunately politics is getting injected into everything all the time now, which I really am weary of. I don't know if everybody else is, but it's just kind of like, oh God, more of this. You know, there's a time and a place, and then sometimes you just need an escapist kind of thing, or you can have a little bit of a subtext of, we better be careful, you know, the warning kind of thing, without somebody saying, and it is so bad to vote for fill in the blank, Trump or whatever, you know, Biden, whoever you are against. We don't need to be told this all the time. You know, that's like indoctrinating. You know, I just want to hear the subtext and go, oh, well, I'll make my own decision. Thank you about that. And so he was very against this kind of overtness.
Well, I will on what you just said.
Yeah.
It's sort of the difference between making you think and telling you how to think.
Exactly.
And older science fiction and the really good storytelling and genre films and novels and comic books and whatever, they make you think about it. It doesn't tell you exactly what to think. And that's the difference between today. That's the woke stuff,
Right.
is telling you this is how you need to think. And if you don't think this way, you're bad.
Mhm.
All that stuff is garbage.
You're part of the
It's
problem.
definitely garbage.
That's a huge problem. And I think that people feel as if they're being virtuous by approaching messages in films and TV that way, because let's be honest, messages have been in film and TV forever. Right?
Yes.
Look at the original Star Trek series, made a lot of comments on war, on racism, on sexism, on a lot of different things. And you know, and what's happening now is people are saying, well, a lot of the films and TV shows are saying these are the right ideas to have, and if you don't have those, you're awful. And then sort of adding in modernity and including like modern day politics and thinking is just going to, here's what I promise you, we're going to look back on this era of woke filmmaking as like a terrible period of time that resulted in a lot of garbage movies, garbage TV shows, garbage comic books, all forgettable art. It's all forgettable,
disposable.
To your point, Chris.
Yeah.
What I think of, I used to think this was just something to do with this particular creator, and I don't like. I like this guy's work overall. Let me just say that first of all, so it's not a personal critique. Stephen King, you know, when he first kind of debuted on the scene, he was always like saying we went to McDonald's and we stayed at the Hojo's and we did all these things, and it made his work very relatable in a sense.
Yeah, he establishes
contributed
reality
to
first.
Popularity, right?
Yeah.
But when you read some of it now, people are like, "What the fuck's a Hojo?"
Right.
You know, like
Right.
he talks about that, you know, because there's not any anymore, you know, and so they know it's a Howard Johnson's, and we're like, well, what's a Howard Johnson's? You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, so those kinds of things. Also, what I would refer to it as badly date the work, right? And we're in the midst of massively dating everything from this era, is what the phenomenon you're describing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm against this because I like universality. That's what makes Logan work. There's a universality to it. That's what makes the Martian Chronicles, even though it's fantasy, that's what makes it work. I mean, we know there are no people on Mars with the singing books and all that. We know that, but that still doesn't take away our enjoyment or learning from the subtext of what the writer is trying to explain to us, you know, whether it's magical realist or whatever you want to call it in Bradbury's case or SF in Logan's Run, because it is not moored and anchored on something so concrete as Donald Trump won. Did you hear? I mean, you know, because I don't want to fucking hear that all day because I know that. And I'm not a Trump supporter, but you know, I don't care if people vote for him because it's none of my fucking business, frankly.
That's why we get into escapist fiction.
Right. Yes, I want to get away from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not have it injected and it's just in my face because it's an outrage. And it's like I don't get all this moralist kind of thing. I mean, if you're going to make a moralist statement about the wrongs of the world, you need to do it like, you know, Gabriel Garcia, Maria Garcia, and Serling and Marquez and people like that, and not do it so overtly is my point.
Yeah, I agree. As long as it's not overt, but there, I mean, presidents have always been very influential. I mean, Nixon weaved his way into The Watchmen, right?
Yeah, right.
Ronald Reagan was effectively in The Dark Knight Returns, written by
Well,
Frank
well,
Miller.
to your point there
yeah.
about King, I'll let you finish that, but he
Yeah.
did use it successfully, that trope, that idea rather,
Mhm.
in The Dead Zone, where he had
Yeah.
to meet Jimmy Carter.
Right.
That worked.
Yeah,
You
like
know, because it's of the
loosely.
time.
I like the idea of loosely based on someone that you kind of know. I mean, even David Letterman is in The Dark Knight Returns. I believe
Right.
it's is it
Don't
issue
forget
3?
the Elephant Man is in From Hell.
Yeah, exactly. It's so I like those kinds of, like, it's sort of veiled, you know, it's like, oh, that's familiar, I get it. But when the messaging is this type of person is just evil,
Yeah.
I think it depends on how it's used. The Dead Zone, that's great. It's so great.
Well, I think that's his best novel anyway, but you know.
Yeah, and the movies.
Well,
pretty
you
And it's a
know,
freaking good.
personally, I have to
book. It's a
say,
fine
from
movie.
my perspective, you know, I think it's my favorite of his movies for sure.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think that The Dead Zone's his best book, and I think it's also a very good film by Cronenberg. So
Yes, yeah, Cronenberg. I mean, normally writes his own stuff, but
Maybe
like,
his most accessible movie.
probably his most accessible. Yeah, no, I'm quite fond of that movie. It's like a good Twilight Zone episode, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's really good, but
It's also kind of an SF-nal idea. You know, the Dead Zone itself, that whole thing is kind of science fiction. He doesn't really normally do that,
right,
except like
right.
in The Jaunt or a few other stories, you know. But he did a good job with that particular story, I felt.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm really curious. Like, William F. Nolan, obviously, if he were here and Logan's Run was being developed, would probably do as much as he possibly could to
Yes.
push back against making changes that would compromise the essence of the concept. You know, like, there are very few franchises that haven't been remade. That would be a really interesting show to do. Let's look. Back to the Future hasn't been remade, and as long as Zemeckis and Gale are alive, I don't think it'll ever get remade. Thank God. Can you imagine doing a female-led, like, you know, whatever, Mandy McFly in Back to the Future? It'd be horrible.
God. Yeah.
And
It
then
wouldn't make any sense.
Mandy
Her-
McFly.
her dad tries to sleep with her.
Yeah.
Think about it. It would be really awkward. Back to the Future's one, Logan's Run, hasn't been remade yet. Talked about for years.
And which one would they remake? Would they remake the movie or the book?
Exactly. Or to take ideas from both. I have to say, like, having read the novel and seen the movie countless times since I was a kid, like, they're really good ideas. That's what's weird. Usually the novel, you know, is like, well, the book is clearly better. I mean, for me, like, you know, I love the Denis Villeneuve Dune, but the Dune book, how do you, unless you make it like a Game of Thrones like series where it's like the first book is like 12, 15 hours
I
or a
agree
couple
totally.
seasons, you're not going to make that book into a movie. Just, that's the only way to do it. Was he, you know, I like what he did. That's like, okay, people understand Dune now, but, like, you know, it's Logan's Run, Back to the Future, Krull, The Black Hole, Disney's The Black Hole, which I thought was a movie that could be improved, actually, because they just go through the black hole and that's it. Okay, but that's kind of the adventure just beginning.
Well,
I mean,
I remember seeing
He
that in the
spliced the whole
theater.
movie, the event horizon, and within it, and you know, and
Right.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in the theater, and my dad looked over at me, and he said, "Do you know where they are?" And I said, "In hell." And then he
Right.
just turned back to the screen, and he didn't even answer me.
Because there's that weird moment where you see Maximilian up on the mountain,
Mhm.
and it's sort of a dream sequence, like, and he's sort of like gone native, and it looks weird. It's very surreal. The one place you can, I mean, I actually bought The Black Hole digital, but it's actually on Disney Plus in 4K. I'm not endorsing Disney Plus. I'm just saying, if you happen to still have it, which I do, because I bought like a 3-year subscription years ago. Yeah, it's in 4K, which is pretty cool.
But
So,
they're not putting it out on 4K like disc.
No. I mean, they look at those movies and like, how many are they going to sell? A couple hundred? You know,
Yeah.
there's really just a very limited audience, and you're going to see physical media continue to just go away.
Thank God for Studio Canal and Groove and, you know,
Well,
all
I'm kind of
those.
hoping that the streaming element
Right.
hits maximum density, and then we have a contracture, kind of like what's happening in music. You know,
Right.
vinyl is making somewhat of a comeback, and so are CDs now. And because for me, as I like to tell people, a gentleman, this would apply to ladies too, should have at least three libraries: books, DVDs, and CDs or records. So you got to have your own library, man, because that tells you other people who you are. It's a reference point, you know. And since I'm a writer and a filmmaker myself, you know, so you have all these things that you need to have reference points to, and then you need to get to. Streaming is convenient, yes, but it's also expensive over time, you know, because you got to buy this, you got to rent that, you got to do the, and then you don't have anything except you've watched it, and that's great, but you know, we need to have our own things that are our own points of interest. And people who have grown up with streaming, I think, are going to get tired of having like, you know, a blank wall, you know, with nothing, you
I
know,
don't
no
know about
bookshelves
that.
or anything.
I don't know about that. It's weird. It's like we're the generation that we collect things. I mean, I've gone through when it comes to physical media, and I'm
Right.
sure you've experienced this, Jason. Like, you know, we had our VHS, then there was even Super VHS. Remember that for a minute, hot minute. Then there was Laserdisc, with kind of around the same time. Then we got to standard def DVD, then Blu-ray, now 4K Blu-ray. I feel like unfortunately, we're the generation that collects it, the generation that is all about streaming doesn't care about that stuff. They prefer to have like fewer possessions. Sad but true.
Which is really odd to me, Chris, because I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, what happens when the government turns the internet off? Because
Right.
they
You don't
built
have
the
anything.
internet. Yeah, you're
You don't have
done.
anything.
You know, you don't have any DVDs, you don't have any VHS, you got nothing. You know.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like,
I don't. Increasingly, you don't even have an iPod, you know,
right,
No,
or a
right.
device
yeah.
where you can listen to music that's battery driven.
I upgraded my
You know,
iPhone, and my old iPhone is my iPod now.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is these days. But I think it's a generational thing. You know, the you know current younger generation just doesn't. They're not as interested in as much physical stuff. I could be wrong. I don't want to speak for Gen Z or millennials, but
I personally hope that they overcome that reticence, you know, and so that they understand that, you know, there's value in having these things around, because
Absolutely.
there's an aesthetic that also is fed into it just by seeing it or touching the physical media, you know, and it can
yeah,
actually bring back memories. It's kind of like Proust, you know, with remembrance of things past. I mean, you can sort of do that with looking at a cover or touching a book or smelling a book or whatever, just like Proust does, you know, when he smells the Madeleine cookies or whatever it is,
mhm.
and he remembers all of these things in great detail. I can definitely do that myself. I don't know if you guys can, but you know, I have that phenomenon with like, yeah, I remember where I was when I saw the film with a person, or you know, by
Yeah.
myself, or
Yeah.
was it a midnight movie or something like that. I mean, God forbid that dates me bad.
Your first
Um,
drive-in movie, stuff like
now,
that.
I remember going to drive-ins with my mother as a kid. You know, my parents were divorced when I was 5, but I remember going to drive-ins with my mother. I remember going to like midnight movies with my dad when he would have me on the weekends. That's where I first saw the Italian version of Dawn of the Dead, you know, and this sort of thing. And so, and then I saw multiple versions of Dawn of the Dead at the drive-in, you know, the midnight movies, because they would show different cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't have these kinds of experiences, you know, I mean, because everything is available all the time. And in a way, scarcity makes things more, I don't know, I think it imprints you
Desirable.
better, you know, when
Yeah.
there's a scarcity involved.
Right. And I think now we just eat pop culture too quickly. Although I am encouraged
Yeah.
by the fact that record stores still exist, that
Mhm.
there's a movement to get back to physical media, and records being probably, you know, the thing that you know, the fact that that's sustained is pretty impressive. But yeah,
Even bookstores are starting to make somewhat of a comeback, which I think is good.
right. But there's that whole like going into, and even coming from the magazine world, right? Magazines are
Right.
replaced by basically internet websites, which is fine. But you know, it's that, you know, I like to say that like magazines are random access. You flip through and you just see something that catches your eye. It could be a
Right.
photo or whatever. But also like these things are dissected so quickly. A movie comes out Thursday night, your screenings Thursday night, opening movies. People are talking about it by Friday, and they can predict based on like, you know, positive or negative people are saying on social media how well a movie will do, how much that'll impact the box office on Sunday. We digest this stuff too quickly. There's not an appreciation where, you know, like I think of a year, and I know you'll remember this year, both of you, 1982 might have been one of the banner years for science fiction.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that was Blade Runner, that was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, that
The
was
Thing.
The Thing,
Poltergeist.
John Carpenter's The Thing. So many great like movies in the year of 1982.
I remember going to see The Thing in a movie theater.
Mhm.
Okay, in 1982, I was 12. Okay,
Okay.
and it was me and a black guy
Mhm.
in the
That was
front
it.
row. He was. I was just kind of in the middle, and we were the only two people there.
Oh, wow.
And
Well,
I watched
scary
the
as
film.
hell.
I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I had to lie to get in there, you know, because it was R. But they let me in. I guess the kid at the ticket thing, you know, he didn't care.
Whatever.
And so I went in, and man, that thing was mind blowing.
Well, it's also like when you saw that movie, you know, when you were a kid, when was it going to come out on video? It'll be a year later. You know, they kept it in theaters, and then it would be like, you know, cable was just a thing that was kind of starting. It was hard to see things, and the you know, the fact that it wasn't just readily available with the snap of your fingers made it like something that was special. You know, like they're talking about HBO is getting rid of the 45-day window of, you know, because the Batman came out and 45 days later it was on HBO Max. Well, how special is that? That movie, I think we all know that, like, and Dune being released day and date on HBO Max was the stupidest decision. Do you know how much money that film could have made had it been in theaters only?
He would have made a ton more money.
Well, Star Wars was held over for like a year in some places.
Yeah, I saw Star Wars in the theater 26 times. And if I can still get away with the segue, speaking of physical media, we are going to be giving away an autographed copy of Jason's Logan's Run solo comic.
Wow.
So stick around to the end of our stream today, and you could be a lucky winner.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That turned out very well, actually, that particular comic. He called me and said it was a guy named Darren Davis, who the less said, the better, let's say. But he said, I need a one-shot for this. And he says, can you write it? And I said, yeah. So I was in Curacao, which is in the Caribbean. We have a computer consulting business. So we were down there doing something related to that. And I wrote it, and I was like, this is pretty cool, because I had some elements in there I wanted to use for the novel Bill and I were working on. So I'd already knocked this scene together. And so I put it in there, and people really liked it. So it is going to be in the novel, but, you know, it's not going to be exactly the same, of course, because it's a comic book. But, you know, he did some things. Darren did some things I liked, but then he did some things that were really annoying, and Bill was very annoyed with him. But I still recommend those versions of the comics. They did start out well. They just kind of petered out, unfortunately.
Now, I don't know anything. I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know much about, like, William F. Nolan. I know talked about a new incarnation of Logan's Run. I mean, that's not, I mean, you know, who knows? It really depends on the approach. And like we were speaking earlier, does it have ideas from the novel, from the movie, or sort of a hybrid, a little bit of both? But did he ever talk about a sequel? Because a sequel would be interesting to explore, like, how do people relearn how to procreate? Like, they've been having all this illicit sex, you know, in the dome.
Yeah, are they sterilized? I mean, you don't know.
Sterilized, and they don't know
do they have STDs? I mean, we don't know.
Like, what is? I mean, they had all this. So, like, what do they find out? Do they go back to like the ruins of the domed city to find out like what the plan was, like who was behind it, and was it Klaus Schwab? So just, you know, was it Klaus Schwab and the WEF who
well, we
created
definitely
the
need a
dome
porn
city?
parody, I think. You know, like Logan Schlong or something, because otherwise, you know, how are you going to tackle all the STDs and, you know, pregnancy issues?
I think Chris made a really good point earlier when we were talking about the youth movement of the 60s, you know, the yippies, the hippies, all that kind of thing, with I think Bill's vision of Logan's Run in the beginning of the book anyway, it talks about how, by 1980, the percentage of young people was this, and then by 1990 it was higher, and then by 2000 critical mass, right?
Right.
So I think that really does, it is of its time,
Yeah.
and it's obviously had an indelible effect on all of our lives. And I just don't know that that's something that could be recreated today.
Yeah. I mean, it's
You'd have to
it's
change the triggering urgency factor, I think.
right, but it's
It wouldn't
also
have to be
like,
population. Maybe it would be climate in this case.
who
Mm-hmm.
knows? Who knows? But I do think that the problem is that a lot of the zeitgeist that's being channeled into modern studio factory filmmaking is just agenda. And I
Mhm.
think that audiences have, especially if you look at the top box office for the past year, you look at the movies that have resonated most with people. I mean, the number one movie is Top Gun Maverick. I mean, it's an escapist sequel to a. We didn't really know we needed a sequel to Top Gun. It's like, okay, Top Gun was fine, but this movie is just. I mean, I've seen it 3 times in IMAX, and it just.
Did you like
really,
it?
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because my wife and I are debating. I'm not a Tom Cruise fan typically, and neither is she.
I like Tom Cruise. I like Tom Cruise,
I
but
like him in certain things. I liked him in Born on the 4th of July, and I've liked him in a few other things, but he's not my like go-to guy. You know what I mean?
right. But it's just what it is it feels like the type of blockbuster movie that Hollywood used to make. That's what it feels like. So, yeah. These are good comments here.
Yeah, we have some great
Yeah, I've
comments.
noticed that. Yeah, I agree with you. There is a big nostalgia wave for the 1980s we're writing right now. And we didn't have a similar, it's strange, we didn't really have the same kind of nostalgia wave for the 1970s or even the 1960s, frankly. But those are also ripe for this sort of nostalgic retake. But Stranger Things, I think, hits all the notes in particular just because it is trying very hard to hit all those notes.
Right.
From the Stephen King cover font, to the, you know what I mean? It's trying to hit like every note. And it's doing, my wife likes it a lot. I enjoy it. I mean, it is just an escapist kind of thing. And it's fun. I think the acting is pretty good. I think sometimes it gets a little too CGI heavy. And it doesn't quite pull it off, but they have a pretty good budget. So it's nothing like, real old school CGI. But I think that, I don't know. I think that there's a lot that there could be done, with more of the 80s kind of phenomenon, getting a little bit away from the King Spielberg axis,
Yeah.
because the 80s was there was a lot happening there. There was also The Shining, there was also David Cronenberg. There was a lot of different kinds of
Salem's Lot
aesthetics.
scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's Tobe Hooper, right? So I mean, there's Texas Chainsaw. I mean, they've tried to remake these things, but they've not tried to make it in the flavor of what happened before. They try to make a slick, more commercial idea of Texas Chainsaw, which that in itself is kind of an oxymoron. But so I don't know. I think that there's a lot that's going to be happening in the future. With Logan's Run in particular, getting to that point, you'd have to have the motivation for why they have such a radical thing happening. There had to have been some kind of collapse of society of some sort. I do address that in the book I'm working on. It's called Logan Falls. And so that book I'm working on,
Logan Falls?
yes. And so that book I'm working on deals with a lot of these questions that kind of go unanswered. So I'm doing a certain amount of retconning, but I'm also trying to put it on a new trajectory or course as to what these things are, because it's not all explained very well. In the Blue Water version, there's a second series, like it's called Past Imperfect or something like. Anyway, it was an idea I came up with, and the writer Paul Salamoff worked with me and Bill very closely.
I know Paul.
Yeah, and so
Known
I
him
came
for
up with an
years.
outline, and he used big parts of that in that iterative version of what happened in the backstory. And because I wanted to change that, and so I changed like the Little War to this thing to where India and Pakistan had a nuclear conflagration and all this kind of thing.
I wrote
Those
a
are
short
things I was
story
putting in
that
my
had
novel
that in it.
with Bill. And so because they bring it up to date, it still stays true to the original thing that they had this thing. But why did it happen? What happened as a result of that? I wanted to make it to where large parts of the planet became uninhabitable due to nuclear fallout and blah, blah, blah. that wouldn't go on forever, but it was a short term, generational impact. So I explained some of that so that it brings everything up to date. And that's what I'm doing in the novel too. But it got sidelined. The novel just got sidelined because Bill, he got ill and things like that. So we backburnered it. And then when he passed away, after I sorted out all the legal, because I'm the heir to Bill's copyrights and everything else, and there was some other legal mumbo jumbo that had to be dealt with, and that's all been now finally put to rest. Mm-hmm. So that all resides with me, and so I'm going to go forward with it because he wanted to go forward with Logan, and so I wanted to see his vision get fulfilled. And since I had an interest in it and worked with him on it too, there's some legitimacy to the heir because Bill didn't have any children or anything, so yeah. And George Johnson's estate, George Clayton Johnson, his family is not in the industry and they're not really writers or anything. Mm-hmm. So it's falling on me, but which is fine.
I am really interested to see like what they would have done, like, because think of the it's almost like, which is where I thought the Matrix was going to go when you saw the first Matrix movie, right? The first Matrix movie. I kind of got the sense that, okay, if they're going to make sequels to this, Neo is going to go in and wake everybody up. Your reality is not what you think it is, right? Everything you've been taught, it's all a lie. It's all wrong. This is the way the world really is, right? And that's what Logan does. He goes in there to wake everyone up, to do what I thought Neo was going to do in a second Matrix movie. The Matrix sequels, I think people sort of agree that they're, in particular, that fourth one is just unwatchable. It's so bad. It
gets really confusing.
Yeah. So
and muddled.
But what would be interesting is that's an idea that went unexplored in the Matrix. Is what do you do when everyone wakes up, right? What do you do? And what you've got two different types of people kind of thinking. You've got maybe one type of people saying, no, that we're going to rebuild the domed cities. We're going to go back in there. And then another group of people say, no, we're going to restart society in some way. We're going to learn about our true past and we're going to create a different life. But like we were talking about, were all the people in the domed city, are they all, infertile? Are they all incapable of having children? Or just children, the only way to procreate is through some sort of weird machines? Do they harvest the DNA from the bodies that go up into carousel? There's all sorts of interesting things that could be explored in a sequel. Maybe a way to do it would be via a comic book.
Well, I thought that's exactly how they started the film, was with Logan 5 looking at Logan 6 and being kind of a proud papa.
Exactly. In a way, it's like, oh, is this my progeny, right?
Yeah.
Like who is this, and why is he like Francis is like, you're a weirdo for even being interested in that. You're weird, dude. Like Logan just thinks a little bit differently, and all the stuff with the computer, his interactions with the computer, trying to tell him how identify is like a big thing. Like I don't know. I mean, now it just makes me want to watch the movie. This just makes me want to watch the movie the more we talk.
We know exactly. Back then, they didn't really have answers to these questions.
Right.
Now we know how it would work, even on a real basic level with the DNA technology, stem cells, in vitro. The book was written prior to the test tube baby and all that stuff, right? So now we know exactly how this would happen. And so there's an expectation, I think, in the reader or the audience to have this explained. And since we know so much now about this kind of thing, and people have done IVF and all this sort of thing, we don't have to belabor that point so much. We could say, well, it was an in vitro fertilization process, blah, blah, blah. There's kind of a shorthand compression of the concepts that they wouldn't have been able to deal with really back then without a lot of mumbo jumbo and, stuff. So I think that those kinds of foundational questions that people have and ask, because they treat this sort of genre writing more and films more seriously now, would need to be answered. Even if it's just a line or two, to explain.
Sometimes I think they over-explain things. Like sometimes
they do over-explain.
They over-explain things. Like I don't need to know Boba Fett, everything about Boba Fett. Boba
Right.
Fett was a badass character that was in the original Star Wars trilogy for 4 minutes. And, we're still talking about Boba Fett. And they did a series and sort of demystified Boba Fett. It was a big mistake. They basically killed the character. So I like that certain things are left mysterious and unanswered, because that means we can continue to talk about them. But if you want to look, if you really think about it, I don't know the last time you saw THX 1138, George Lucas's version. He did a special edition and added monkeys at the end for some reason, God knows why. But what's interesting is like
Lucas needs to leave his own work alone.
Right, he does. But THX 1138 is like the
I bet he wishes he hadn't now.
incredibly unromantic, uncommercial version of Logan's Run. I mean, in that movie, Robert Duvall's character, THX 1138, is just being drugged. He's being just given drugs to like, don't think too much. Here's your drugs. When you really go back and watch THX 1138, it's going to blow your mind how like things that were happening that were considered, oh, that's so strange. Like, oh, it's kind of happening now. Like, here's your drugs, like love. Don't worry about, you can't fall in love with it.
It's also a little bit reminiscent of Philip K. Dick's, not We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, but the other one. Andrew's Dream of Electric Sheep, where they have mercerism and they have the mood organ, and the wife always wants to be on the depressed setting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's sad. I thinking about that movie, I'm like, oh my God, like how many things are coming true? Like just solving your problems with a pill. That's a thing that happens now, rather than like, years of therapy, which is something that would really, or exercise, which, that can at least break you out of a depression, right? Not all, I'm not saying not all, and I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying, exercise, there's a lot of things. Exercise and regular 8 hours of sleep. A lot of things can be solved by that, and not eating garbage.
That's definitely true.
That's true.
Not eating garbage like that.
Not eating garbage. I was going to say
those sort of basic things. You can reach a pretty decent physical state, healthy physical state. But yeah, THX 1138, like it's not as visual. It's not as much of a visual feast. I mean, they're really cool, like the cops, right? The robot cops. But a lot of the same things kind of occur. He sees a woman he's interested in. You're not allowed to love anybody. He's medicated, and he tries to escape. He tries to escape civilization.
That reminds me, actually, of the very first version of 1984 that was done in 1954 with Donald Pleasance on the BBC.
Right. Yeah,
Very
and there's
much
a
like
book.
that.
There's a book that is that when I read in high school that very much reminded me by Ayn Rand. Not to bring her into it. Ayn Rand wrote a novel called Anthem.
Yep. It's
basically Logan's Run. I mean, a more political version of it. It's like 1984 meets Logan's Run, but Anthem, it's more like a novella.
That is the libertarian version.
Yeah, the libertarian version, but it's just about two characters. They fall in love and they want to escape society. This is like, I mean, Logan's Run embraced that, a little bit of Brave New World, a little bit of THX 1138. Like, this was a thing. What's weird now is we're seeing, like, in our current, they say, like, there's that meme, like, make 1984 fiction again. Like,
I've never heard that. That's great.
Oh, you never heard that one? Make 1984 fiction again.
That's
like,
great.
Like so many of the things that are happening in the distressing things happening in society is, lies that happen right in front of your eyes. Like, but wait, I see that. That's not. They don't
not even try to hide it.
Yeah. You're not even putting it, or it's like, no, I never said that, and then here's the video where you said that. Like, like it's bizarre, but.
The genesis of Logan's Run is interesting. The genesis of Logan's Run is interesting. I'll give you a very brief backstory here, and then I'll explain what I mean. I met Bill. He was one of the last people I interviewed for a documentary I did about Charles Beaumont. And so Charles Beaumont was teaching at the UCLA Extension, and he would have guest speakers come in. One of them was Ray Bradbury. He had others, and Bill was one. Excuse me, I have some allergies. So he had Bill come in, and the concept or the theme that Beaumont wanted to talk about was, what is the difference between science fiction and social fiction? And so Bill thought about this before he went in. He's a young guy in his 20s, I think. And he goes in and he
social
starts
commentary, you mean?
He starts teaching. He says, well, social fiction is life begins at 30. And the guy runs away with the chorus girl and all that, kind of the stereotype, right? And he said, science fiction is life ends at 30. Now, the movie did come bring that back, and it was just a coincidence. But then Bill said, well, to make the stakes higher, he mused on this, and he kind of wrote a little tiny few scraps of ideas. And the original name of it was Killer Man, Leave My Door, which was based on a little poem that started the original short story that has never been reused. And so he changed it, and the character's name was Morgan, originally. And so he gets with George, and they start making notes, and they decide to make notes on like index cards for like a year, and then they reconvene after about a year, and they start putting the book together with Bill's basic plot of this guy of life ending at 21, and the guy's a Sandman, and and all this kind of stuff. And so they start imbuing the novel with all their influences, which you could see in the introduction. I mean, not the introduction, but the dedication, which is a very long dedication page. And
you got to answer that question, Jason.
well,
that's a great question.
I honestly, I don't know. I don't think they very well explained that.
I don't think they did either.
The arc would lead them somewhere. I don't know. We'll come back to that in 1 second. So after they get the novel together, Bill then takes the version and out to San Francisco and polishes it, and then they sell it to Dial Press, and then then it eventually becomes the film. And so it's the whole thing, the way it came together is pretty interesting about the amalgamation of ideas,
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I wanted to play a little bit of video.
As far as the Ankh, though, but as far as the Ankh, I'm not sure, and maybe the Ankh could feature, more prominently in what I'm trying to do with the book, because I've wondered about what to do with some of those iconography.
That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. I would like to play a couple of clips that I took when you and Sonny and Bill were here. I have to preface this with an apology for the video, but I took it with a digital camera that had a video setting that would take almost 3 minutes of video, and then I had to dump it on my laptop and then delete it and do it again. So it actually works out pretty well, but I think this is kind of fun, so let's check this out.
Mean? I was mean. Here, it's your, you talk.
No. You talk about your role in your truth. Any questions you have, direct them to him, and then I'll correct them.
Well, here's what happened. Roger Corman optioned The Intruder from Chuck Beaumont, who was my best friend. We were in Los Angeles. I said, listen, I'm a ham actor. I would love to go to Missouri with you and film this thing. And he said, but you haven't done any professional acting. And I said, no, I said, I love villainous roles. I said, the hero is nothing, but the villain, you can get your teeth into it. I said, I'll be nasty, I'll be unshaven, I'll wear an old snake hat, and I'll put a match in my mouth. I said, I'll be fine. He said, well, okay, but you got to convince Roger Corman. So we go over to Chuck's apartment, and we got a tape recorder set up, and Roger's very nervous. He says, all these friends of yours are going down to play in my movie? And Chuck says, oh, they'll be fine. And Roger's saying, oh my God, they're all amateurs. It's going to be a disaster. And so Roger said to me, would you mind, talking on the microphone the way you're going to talk down there? I said, yeah, I come from down there. What the hell? I got to come around that corner about like 60 miles an hour. My God, I almost hit my car. He said, that's good. I said, yeah, I know how to talk. So we go to Missouri. It's the boot of Missouri, down on the part near Mark Twain country,
Hannibal.
Hannibal, near Hannibal. So we're down there and we shoot the whole thing with real set. Everything you see in the movie is real. We didn't build anything. Every hotel room, every restaurant, we were chased out of 3 different playgrounds with that last scene with the black kid, because the reason we were chased out is because they said there are a bunch of commies down here trying to stir up trouble between the whites and the blacks. These commies are reds. We got to get rid of them. So I got to tell this story. It's in the documentary. I'm going to tell.
No, don't tell it.
I can't tell it.
No, not.
Can't tell you the
No, I'll tell you one thing that's interesting. I'll tell you one thing interesting though that you've forgotten. There are no extant scripts of The Intruder.
Extant.
Extant. I said that.
It's extant.
No, that's extends. That's what you mean. Extant means there are no scripts. All the actors were only given. See, what happens when you open your mouth and I'm here. So there were no. Only the actors were only given sides. They were not given the whole script because they were afraid that the script was going to get into the hands of the local people, and they were going to have to. And then they would figure out the jig was up. You know what I mean? And so they would have to, they'd be chased out of town. So they only got sides. Nobody had the script except Roger Corman. And many years later, I said, "Do you have a full script?" And he said, "No." Let me start again. "No, I would like to. You're going to edit this, right?" And that's exactly what he said. And I said, "Yeah, we're going to edit it." He says, "Well, Chuck Beaumont, he wrote a script, and I had one, but it's gone now." So I actually found one at the University of UCLA library. It's the only place in the world that they have a full script of The Intruder. One copy. That's true.
Are you through now?
Careful. Who drove you down here? So
I have to walk back to LA. No, I live in Vancouver, so I'm okay. Well, anyway, there's not much more to say except we went down there. We shot it in 3 weeks, and the sheriff was after us the whole time, man. I mean, he said, "You stay out of that park. You understand?" And we went to lunch one day, and Chuck Beaumont, who played the school principal, by the way, he was the guy, Harley Patton, the guy that came out, and that was Charles Beaumont. We went to lunch one day with Joey, the boy, the star of the kid, and the sheriff says, "You can't eat in this park with black people. This is a park for white people. Black people can't eat with white people." And I said, "That's crazy." I said, and Chuck said, "Well, we'll just eat somewhere else where we can eat." And I don't think we ever did find a place where we could eat. That was terrible that day.
still waiting to eat.
Finally, we went into town, and this is going to be, you're going to see a lot of this in documentary, so I don't want to tip it. So you'll see some stuff in the documentary that relates directly to The Intruder. So that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
Yeah.
Corman and Shatner both said that they got death threats during the filming. Did you ever fear that your life was in danger?
I'll say, man, we got plenty of threats. People are going to come down, but I'll save that for the documentary. You'll see it on the documentary.
There were a lot of there were death threats.
A lot of death threats, yeah.
Corman said that.
For all of us, for the whole cast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it
there's
was
some amusing.
pretty scary, actually.
Well, sadly, William Shatner just doesn't like Bill or something. But
No, he likes me.
Well, kinda. He likes bullying you. But the thing is,
So do
Shatner's
you.
kind of a. No, I don't bully. Don't make me hit you.
That's what a bully would say.
No, William Shatner. He did bully everybody on the set, I think, because it was his first really star role where he was taking full command of everything. He'd been in another film, I think, right before that, but it was not a leading role.
No, I think that was his breakthrough film.
That was his breakthrough. He'd been in like supporting roles, a couple of smaller films.
And a lot of Broadway material.
A lot of Broadway, but he was fantastic, I thought. Did you like him in that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's like one of the best things he's done.
Yeah. Now, when he did Captain Kirk in Star Trek, he leveled out and he did it on one level. In this film, he started as a very charming fellow with the young girl in the drugstore, and he became more and more evil as the thing went through. I thought he did a fantastic job.
It was pretty nuanced. I actually thought you did a good job.
I was nasty in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trouble was that we were filming something that was actually happening in Caxton. They didn't want blacks to go to the school. They had been integrated, and they didn't like it. The people didn't like it. It was a very racially charged atmosphere that was, and we thought it was all over. We thought immigration had been taken care of, and we go down there and make this movie, and it was all. Oh no, we were right in the middle of that speech he gave on the steps of the courthouse. These people bought it. I mean, they thought that what he was saying, we were trying to show what a bigot would do, what a terrible, evil person.
that's getting too close to what you're going to say in the film.
So, yeah, there we have some footage of Bill and what I think of as some pretty happy memories. Now, Jason, I hope you will remember that when I kind of hooked you and James Gunn up at the Center for the Study of Science Fiction, I told you, be sure when you guys come that you don't come opposite either a basketball game or a football game.
Yep.
And it was the only day in living memory when there was both a KU football game and a KU basketball game. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay.
But
good.
I didn't have any. I don't know what that noise is.
Any input over the date?
The only thing I could think of is that when I explained that all to them, they only had one limited date, or I don't know what it was, but they only had that one schedule available. So we had to go ahead and take it because, it was a good opportunity to get Bill down there and myself, show the film, all that kind of thing. Didn't go without, hiccups as is normal, but mostly people were very pleased with the whole, presentation. And I think we showed the Intruder.
It was a lot of fun. It was a great night.
It was. We had a signing that day too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've got lots of photos. I don't know where they are right now. But anyway, back to our conversation about Bill Nolan, and I have to say also as a writer that his book, How to Write Horror Fiction, was a huge influence on me personally.
Yeah, that was a good book. Also, one other thing about when Logan came out that year, 1976, the movie, that was a big year for Bill because it was also the same year that Burnt Offerings came out, and he co-wrote the screenplay for Burnt Offerings with Dan Curtis, who had done Dark Shadows and all the several other films for made-for-TV things. But Burnt Offerings is a really good movie. If you watch it again, it holds up well. We did a screening of Burnt Offerings at the Egyptian one time with Bill and some other people, and because I've done a few screenings at the Egyptian. One was the Charles Beaumont documentary was debuted there, and also we did Burnt Offerings later with Logan's Run, as I recall. It was like a double bill, and a different time. And then when we did the I didn't see that quote, but I'll come back to it. The Harlan Ellison thing. The thing about yeah, they need to pay the writer, that's for sure. But with Burnt Offerings, there's no good film prints of it left. They're all disintegrating, and so we had to do it off DVD. So it had recently been released on Blu-ray, as I recall. So they were forced to do that because all the film copies they tried to get, and they got like 3, had all been severely turning. They were turning, magenta and everything from the fix not being removed thoroughly enough, and it was just terrible. So I lament the whole situation where films are deteriorating and that art form is kind of being lost. We need to be more cautious with the archiving of it. So that's eventually going to happen.
Not let so many of our films turn into oxide flake.
Yeah, that happens also. They disintegrate and they come off this acetate and all that kind of stuff. But it's I think Bill had a banner year that year with Logan's Run and Burnt Offerings happening at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And both big genre pictures, one's horror and one's, I think he said that was Betty Davis's last vehicle, one of them. So
one thing I wanted to ask the both of you guys, since you're both scholars of the book, it seems to me like the book predicted the internet in 1967.
You mean the thinker?
Yeah, well, that all these other domed cities around the world were supposedly connected and also had their own thinkers, and they were networked. And they mentioned the word networked in the book.
Well, in the book, they weren't domed. They were, mile-high cities and all that stuff. But the concept is the same, that they had this centralized, that kind of came from the old ENIAC and things like IBM's old central way of doing things, and kind of a hub and spoke way of looking at things that changed because the mainframe thing went away in favor of personal computing. But then it kind of came back with the advent of the internet and decentralizing, the storage of contents. And so you didn't have one central thing so much as you had multiple hub and spoke things, almost like the way they do airports now.
Right.
So I think that they did sort of pioneer some of these concepts in the book inadvertently, because Bill and George were not like science guys necessarily, like a Larry Niven or somebody. But they did have enough wits about them to say, if you did this, you could do that, and maybe do it. But they didn't really explore the concept. They just said, kind of, the idea is a bit of a throwaway in there. But I mean, we do take it for granted now, so who needs to say, why would they need to elaborate on it, really?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't consider myself a scholar of the book, of the movie for sure. I mean, I've obsessively watched that movie. I mean, one thing that's never been explained, I don't know if this, first of all, it didn't bother me when I saw this as a kid. But, when you think about, as you get older, you start to look at these things, and especially movies like classic genre movies that you've seen too many times, you all know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then you begin to notice like little details, like the stormtrooper bumping his head on the Death Star, like little things. Like when I've watched the movie, my attention's already over here, and I'm looking at the magic trick, and now I'm kind of looking at other things, right? But one thing, it's like, like, why would a robot from the future have an Austrian accent, and why do Logan and Jessica have British accents and no one else does?
that is something that I have said. Yeah, he did write part of Trilogy of Terror. He wrote most of Trilogy of Terror. There's a funny story about that I'll get to. I have said the same thing, and I'm going to point that out in that article I'm thinking of. And I'm like, why in this future did they have accents?
Right.
I thought the same thing. I was like, why? It's like the same phenomenon. You go, how come everybody from ancient Rome is British? Right? I mean, every time you see a movie that has like ancient Rome, it's always like John Gielgud, and it's like,
even in the series Rome.
I know, everybody's a Brit, and so I think it comes from probably Shakespeare and the tradition of Shakespeare doing a lot of,
I think you're
the
right.
Roman emperors as part of the story arcs. But anyway, that whole idea of things having any kind of regionalism, I guess, is something that I think would go away. I think we're kind of experiencing the going away of that even now. Even though we live in regions still, a lot of regionalism is kind of fading away. This is probably part of the reason we're having so much political strife, is because we're kind of having a flattening of all of culture and society, and people are fighting that, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's a phenomenon that happens whenever this kind of cultural flattening starts to take effect. But no, I agree with you, Chris. There's no reason to have accents.
But at the same time, you and I
have to have learned them. They would have to have learned them
right
in nursery.
Right. You and I are the only people probably obsessing over that. But I mean, think about it. Maybe there are teachers in nursery, and some of them have accents because the domed city was a global effort to save humanity, and there were delegations from France and from the UK and from Saudi Arabia and other parts of the world. So there would have been different accents depending, largely shaped by those. Yeah, Tiger Stripe says a person's accent is largely shaped by who teaches them to speak as a baby. So
yeah, but conceptually, they teach in the book, and they are taught by an auto-governess.
Right.
So that means that the auto-governess would have to have an accent. If the auto-governess is a robot,
right,
that doesn't kind of your point is good, but it doesn't make sense in the context of the book. But if different areas still taught language, you know what I mean, like French, or what I'm saying, then there might be still some accents and things like that,
which would make it a different computer.
But we don't know. We would have to. I wanted to
Logan
expand
is
the reach
taking
of the
his
book.
directions from.
Yeah, I want to
that
expand
one's
the reach of
American.
the book into more of a multinational exploration of what happened. You know what I mean? Instead of like Anglo-centric. There's nothing wrong with the Anglo-centric. It's just we get that, but what happened in Middle East, and what happened in China, and what happened, because this was a global catastrophe, right? As far as the origins of the book. So that's what I'm trying to do in the new novel. I'm stripping away some of the things that have kind of bound it in, and I wanted to expand it and deconstruct it. And Bill was all in favor of this. So, he and I worked on some things to that end.
Well,
So,
I think also science fiction written today is much more sophisticated because, and I'll just give you a simple example. The movie Tron, the original Tron, okay? I love that film. It's simply the Wizard of Oz. Flynn gets sucked into this fantasy world. Is it a dream? Did he hit his head? Was he really digitized and became a program in a computer? Who knows? You could look on it differently, but knowledge of computers was not common when that movie came out in the early 80s.
no.
It was not common. And my father, who worked in computers, he worked for Chrysler in the leasing department. He'd on a Saturday, he'd have to go to work. He'd drag me into work and I would play the text-based Star Trek game. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah, it was great. Like you could, the Enterprise has left dry dock. I remember seeing that come up in text and, oh my God, I'm like, basically you just point a direction, a different kind of text would come up. It was pretty lame.
It's
But
like
then my dad he'd come on with like these stacks of computer cards that I would just scribble on, right? Because they had like these rooms full of computers and now I can hold that in my hand. But the thing is that I think part of the reason Tron didn't succeed when it originally came out is because much of the language of Tron was not widely understood. It wasn't common knowledge. Like my dad loved that movie. He loved Tron because one character is named Ram. This is a bit, there were like all these things that were like in computer language, there was sort of an anthropomorphized version of something from computers. I think that the sequel, which came out way too late and was way too modern, and I don't like that sequel, Tron Legacy. I know a lot of people defend it. With the exception of the music and the production design, I'm not a fan of that film. And I think they missed a huge opportunity to anthropomorphize things that people already commonly understand. Now we're in a world today, and even at the time that Tron Legacy came out, where we understand certain terms. I really think that Tron Legacy should have had literal pirates in there with bootleg software and all sorts of things that things that are kind of commonly known. They could have found a way to work it in somehow. And, but it's just interesting. I feel like now audiences are more sophisticated, not only when it comes to their media consumption, but also when it comes to their understanding of things. And when Tron came out, most people didn't even what the hell is this movie? They go in a light world and whatever. And it's like, I mean, Jason, Gil, you probably know a lot about the behind the scenes of that movie. Things, hand painted. I still have my laser disc, the box set. So good. And that film is the stuff of legends because I always love a movie that pushes the limits of the technology and finds a clever way. I mean, Star Wars, the original Star Wars was basically a tech demo for every possible way to do a special effect at the time. I mean, and some of them were so simple physical effects, like putting the mirrors under the land speeder,
right,
and blurring it slightly. Like that made it look like they were going real fast. Like it's just mirrors. It's like a golf cart, it's so unsophisticated. But like pushing those limits, Tiger Stripes. Hey, thanks for hanging out in the chat.
Peace out.
Good to meet you. But I think that there's an opportunity now that people understand things a little bit more. I think the efforts by, there are.
Don't forget Dan O'Bannon did those visual effects too for the, the whole going into the, he did what do they call them? All those primitive computer screens and all that kind of stuff. Dan did all that stuff
for Alien or Dark Star
for Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Didn't
so
know
when
that.
they're going into all that
simple
digital
computer
stuff, that's all
screens.
kind of done by hand.
Oh wow, yeah,
It's almost like an animation versus a computer generated.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon animation, but but yeah, like when you look at the, hey Darius, good to see you here. When you look at the, level of sophistication that Tron was done at the time, the story was just hampered by the audience wasn't ready for that movie yet. The audience was not ready for that movie yet, and that's fine. I feel like audiences are more sophisticated today, and I think that what's interesting about Logan's Run, but also dangerous about it, and other things like it, 1984 is dangerous. THX 1138, Anthem by Ayn Rand, that novella. Movies and novels and fiction that question society with or even the original Matrix, like, hey, wake up. This is not the real world that you're seeing. You're being presented a fictional version of the world, i.e. mainstream media, i.e., press releases from the government. This is not inflation.
Right.
Redefining terms. I mean, and you're sitting here, wait a
That's
second.
kind of like Orwellian doublespeak.
Yeah, Orwellian doublespeak. It's just bizarre,
Exactly.
but in Logan's Run, it's like, you go to Carousel, you get renewed. You are reincarnated. You become like, okay, but no, that's all a lie. The life clocks are a lie. Carousel is a lie. Like,
And
See, I
I
wanna
knew
imbue
that
some of
Carousel
that-
was a lie
some of
when
that-
I saw this movie for the first time. I mean, it's just maybe I'm too much of a rationalist materialist, but for me there was no maybe about it.
no, but it was just like, what's interesting is I wonder if this idea would resonate, because so many people these days are content living in the fiction, right?
Mhm.
Whatever the fiction that they're perceiving. And there are efforts, I think, around to kind of remake the world in a certain way.
Well, there's kind of an inversionary irony in that the more connected we become, the more siloed we tend to be.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I was wanted to address that in the novel too that I'm working on, because for me, the way they renew, for lack of a better term, because that's not what I'm calling it in the book, is almost kind of like tied into like this Hindu notion of reincarnation and collapse and reincarnation and collapse. But I wanted to do a spin on that. I'm an atheist myself, but I am kind of philosophical about these sorts of things, Buddhism and Hinduism in particular. But, so I wanted to kind of, and Bill was more or less an atheist too. So, we talked about these things, about how we would, because somebody mentioned, what about, the religion of the times, et cetera, because that part is sort of lacking in the movie and the book.
Mhm.
And I would like to go into that element a little bit as far as Logan himself and his relatives, let's say. So the book is going to be interesting, I think, for people who like Logan's Run.
Do you
It's
mean
not
his
going to be
descendants?
it's not going to be like a part of it is adventure, but there's going to be more philosophical treatments of some
When
of
you
these
say
things.
Logan's relatives, do you mean his descendants?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if they went like 100 years in the future, Logan's passed away, but there are his.
This will be a lot longer in the future. This will be
A lot
way
longer.
farther. I'm talking like thousands of years in the future.
Right, but how would he be? Would he be deified as the person that broke people out and woke them up, or would he be vilified? Would he be looked on
It
as
depends on whether
you
it's the book or the
destroyed-
movie.
Well,
you destroyed destroyed society?
Because
You
here's
destroyed
the
this
thing,
perfect
Chris.
world we had.
The,
What's
my
that?
movie,
Logan is still alive thousands of years in the future.
Oh wow.
yeah,
Okay.
Like he has
As-
thousands of year lifespan.
as you see in the comic, spoilers.
Yeah.
yeah.
But the book
there's
is
a lot I
actually
can do with all of that kind of thing, but there's a lot of changes that take place as a result of that. So
the book is actually, as far as I can tell, it's actually a dystopia that turns into a utopia. The movie is a dystopia
Mm.
well,
because
it's a
in the
utopia
book,
decaying into a dystopia in the movie.
in the book, there is sanctuary,
Mm-hmm.
but they have to leave everyone behind.
Mm-hmm.
And in the film, they go back for everybody and get them out. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I
And then where do
guess
they
it
go?
depends on what.
You know,
what
Bill
you're-
wrote 2 other books, and a excuse me, a novella to that effect. But he didn't really answer many questions.
Mhm.
So he set up a lot of scenarios, but not a whole lot of answers. And those are decent books. They're not quite on the same level as Logan's Run, but they're still worth reading to understand the whole Logan universe, as I call it.
Mhm.
There's a lot they could do if it was not just a movie.
Yeah.
So my personal position is this should be more of like a streaming sort of event.
Oh, I agree.
Oh yeah, it could be like an ongoing series that maybe retells the events of the book / movie, that then continues,
Oh,
right?
maybe it could be from two different people's points of view, even.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you look at the way they did Westworld, say, right, and that Westworld, they've really expanded that universe, considering it's really only a kind of a movie and a half if you count Future World.
Right,
But
right.
I really just go to the canonical film of Westworld, which I really love that movie still, but mainly because Brenner is just incredible in it. But you know, I think that the way Crichton set all that up was interesting, and the way they've been taken elements out of Crichton's original concept and expanded on that and fused it with now, you know, the technology we have now is very fascinating. And to me, that's the kind of thing I'm trying to do for Logan. I want to bring it forward in the future while still respecting where it came from and originated. Some of that will have to be retconned a little bit. I'm not real big into that, but it just to make it work together and make sense. You
Well,
know,
I mean,
some of it will have to be kind of undone, you know,
right.
in a way, because it
Part of
doesn't
it-
hold water now, you know. But
Right. But I think part of it is also like, you know, you've got
and Bill was on board with all that. He and I had discussed this ad nauseam, you know. So
but it's like you look at like, I mean, look, the flaw to me that the Logan's Run movie has, unfortunately, is the effects, and it's in a shopping mall. Like there's escalators and
yeah, but at the time the mall looked cool, man. You know,
They made it
And
really
I
weird.
thought that the
They
special
dressed
effects were
it's
really
like it's like the
innovative,
inversion
you
of
know?
Dawn of the Dead. You know,
for, yeah, for its time, yes. For now, it's literally, if I suggest it to anyone like in their 20s, they're like, that's that lame science fiction movie with escalators.
yeah.
Like they
Right.
focus on the escalators. And I get it, but it's the themes of the movie that I think are important. And that I think still resonates, at least with me. What I'm saying is, I wonder if the themes of this movie could even get by a major studio these days, because in many ways they're very radical. Hollywood used to, you know, basically espouse like radical ideas, not push them, but at least get people to think about radical things. And that's not the case anymore. I really feel like Hollywood is very very much on board with like, this is the message, that's the approved message that we're going to push, that's going out there, you know. So yeah, unfortunately, gentlemen, I gotta leave very shortly here. I know we're supposed to go till 4, but I may need to bail. So if you got a final question or comment or whatever, I'll address it. But I got 2 movies I'm trying to finish right now, so I'm kind of like, my life is very scheduled.
Well,
Unfortunately.
that's okay because Darius Munchausen is here.
Hey,
Hey!
good to meet you, man.
Yeah, good to meet you. You
That's
know, you're a
awesome.
hometown hero over here. You know, in
Where?
Detroit.
Wait,
Detroit.
where are you? Where are you in Detroit?
Outside Detroit, but
Nice. I grew up in Royal Oak.
yeah, my best friend is from Royal Oak.
Royal Oak, and then used to hang, I mean, right off Woodward Avenue.
You
Where
from
do you live now,
Joycey?
Chris?
What
Two
exit?
blocks.
What area? What area
2
are you
blocks.
in? Where?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I'm in Pasadena now.
Oh, that's
but I-
right. You mentioned that.
But I grew up in Michigan, and what's weird is now I live somewhere in California that's basically like Michigan. I mean, Pasadena's very blue collar, very salt of the earth, working people. Like, it's
Mhm.
not caught up in bullshit. There's every kind of bar and restaurant. It's super hip and fun, but it's not so hip as to attract hipsters and annoying people. So,
I don't
yeah,
know if
Darius,
I don't know if anybody's going to be in ShyCon 8 in Chicago in September, but I'm going to be there with my wife. So
nice.
I'll be
But
on
Darius, what part of
panel.
Michigan? You say outside Detroit.
Yeah, about 30 minutes outside Detroit.
That's cool. I still have a lot of family back there. I've got my sister lives in Ann Arbor, and a lot of family back there. So I'm overdue for coming back. I tried to do a meetup last time I was there at Gusseline Alley.
Yeah, I've been there.
The bar, love that bar.
Tank
The
of
biker bar.
gasoline.
It's a great bar, great bar. But good to meet you. I wish I could stay, but I've got to run.
Well,
you'll-
Chris,
thanks for being
thanks
on the
so
show.
much for doing this.
of
I'm
course.
really happy to have you on the channel and can't wait to have you back. And this was a really productive discussion. We had something like 300 comments.
Oh, that's
Wow.
great. Well, I like taking a deep dive, you know, the Film Threat YouTube channel, which hopefully you're your viewers are familiar with it. We kind of just go through a lot of independent films. We interview filmmakers, but it's rare for me to be able to take a deep dive into a movie that I know way too much about, that I have a fandom for. I dressed as Logan at Dragon Con.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, and I used to. Okay, don't laugh. I used to make working life clocks, red ones that flashed.
Wow.
And I would make them. This is true. I would make them, and then I would sell them for 30th birthday parties. I had an Etsy where I would sell life clocks, and I'd sell them for like 10, 15 bucks each. I think it probably cost me like $2 to make them.
I bet they sold like hotcakes.
They sold a lot, but it's just like you had to like get like something sticky to put on it, and it would flash. Be a flashing life clock.
I want one.
Oh my God, that's so nerdy.
Yeah, no, it's like Uber. And not only dressing as a Sandman from Logan's Run, that's not that original. What I did, I dressed as Logan after he went to the New You.
Yeah.
So the suit has like cuts, and I went and I looked exactly where the cuts were, and where like I had like the tattered, it was like Logan after kind of all like his suit got all messed up.
Logan
so,
After Dark.
Yeah. Logan after, and I ran into a dragon, kind of ran into a guy who also was dressed as a Sandman. He's like, "Oh my God, you went to the New You." So that was like super. I don't like.
That's the big payoff right there.
You probably would have liked the Logan's Run conventions they used to have.
Oh my God, I would love to go to. I think I still have the pieces of that costume. I kind of cobbled it together. It's not a hard cosplay to do, but it's also one that people rarely do. You know?
Yeah.
I even got my hair to kind of look a little bit like Michael York, but God, I love this movie. So Gil, thanks for having me on. Jason, pleasure to meet you. I'm obviously familiar with your work. So congrats again on everything. And Darius Munchausen, good to meet you. I know I see you in our Film Threat live stream chat, so thank you for that.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime, Chris, on something else. Maybe we could do Carpenter or something.
I feel like a deep dive into a movie would be great, like Tron or something.
I love Tron.
Oh
Yeah, like something like
or
that.
Or The Thing.
I mean, both of those, like
game either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Nolan wrote the original treatment for The Thing that got rejected, that then was turned into The Thing.
I did not know that.
Talking about the John Carpenter one or the remake? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Or which remake? I guess they're both remakes.
Yeah, well, the 2000, the 82 one.
Yeah.
He started, and then they went with a different direction. And so, but I could explain a lot of that. He wrote, Anthony Rotolo reprinted The Thing, the story, in like the script or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill wrote an introduction, and he talks a little bit about that. But he and I talked about that a while back. That's an interesting one. But that's always a good movie to go into.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm sure I'll be back at some point. Gil, thanks again. Take care, everybody.
Take care, Chris.
Cat. Awesome.
See you, Chris.
Later. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, let's bring on our spinner wheel so that we can find out who our lucky winner is.
All right. Now, I've entered these names manually from the chat. We have 11 entries. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Hit it. I love that sound. Oh.
Phantom Boomer! Congratulations.
Congrats, Phantom Boomer. And I have Phantom Boomer's information. He's such a regular winner, Jason, on our shows that I'll just be able to go ahead and send that to you.
Cool.
So thanks for
sorry,
cool giveaway.
in my video feed here, I have more than one camera set up. This is like the backup camera, and for some reason my regular camera just died right before I came on here. So I apologize for the weird.
Hey, you still have a camera. Mine doesn't work.
Yeah, well, I apologize for the weird moving it around and all this stuff. So
no, that's fine. It's fine. Actually, mine does work, which is the really irritating thing. But Friday, they'll be here Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That's the old Star Trek joke, right?
Yeah, I saw that comment about Farrah Fawcett. I was thinking about her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Escape from New York. That'd be a good one to go into.
Yeah. I think we should do that. In any case, We're just up against 2 hours, so I want to thank everybody in the chat that's been here. It's been a great show. Jason, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate everybody's questions. They're very interesting.
I will definitely reach out to you again, and maybe we can drag Chris back kicking and screaming for one of these other cool films. And thanks, Darius, for helping us out with the wheel. And that's going to do it for today's show.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So if you need anything else, just let me know, and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was a blast. So